They thought no one would notice until the soil told the truth. After my father's sudden death, I returned to his land and found buried devices, forged permits, and a smiling HOA president with a hidden agenda. But she didn't know the trail cams were rolling, and when the state got involved, let's just say, the land remembered everything. And so did I. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. They say the land remembers. I didn't fully believe that until I pulled into the gravel driveway of my father's property 3 days after we buried him. Everything looked the same, and nothing did. The barn still leaned slightly left, like it always had. The porch light still flickered from a faulty wire he swore he'd fix one day, and the old sycamore tree still spread its crooked arms toward the sky. But the silence, it wasn't just absence. It felt like something watched, like something had shifted the second he left. My dad, Jack Winston, was a simple man, veteran, mechanic. Lived on this 12-acre stretch outside of Red Willow, Texas for 43 years. He called it God's back porch. Said the air out here cured more than medicine. And he never once mentioned leaving. Not when Mom passed, not when the knees gave out. Not even when the HOA tried coming for his land 10 years ago. I remember that first letter. I was in college, and he'd mailed me a photocopy, circled in red pen. Notice, Parcel 12A may be subject to future municipal reclassification. He called it bureaucratic baloney. Said if they wanted his fence moved, they'd have to come yank the posts themselves. Now, standing at the gate, he welded himself. I saw something new. A white laminated sign. Fresh zip ties. Bright red letters. HOA notice. Unauthorized encroachment. Violation pending. Encroachment. On his land? I unlocked the gate, the metal screeching like it hadn't moved in weeks. The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I walked toward the shed. That's where he kept his files, his maps, his bourbon. I didn't touch anything at the funeral, couldn't. But now I needed answers. Inside, the air was stale. Dust in the sunbeams. His workbench untouched. Pegboards still holding every wrench. Each one outlined with a Sharpie so he'd always know where it belonged. That was Dad. Order in chaos. I opened the drawer beneath the vice grip. Expecting receipts, maybe old land taxes. What I found stopped me cold. A manila envelope labeled in thick black marker. If they come after the East Line, start here. Inside were hand-drawn maps, photos dated in the corner, and a half-written letter in my father's neat block handwriting. Matt, if you're reading this, it means I'm not around to finish what I started. I've been watching them. The HOA. Ever since Diane took over. She's not just about lawns and noise complaints. She's after something else. I've caught them trespassing, digging, moving the stakes. They say our boundary's wrong. It's not. I walked that line with my father. Buried the corner marker myself in 1983. They're lying. And they're planning something. My pulse quickened. I flipped to the photos, grainy trail cam stills. 3 men with clipboards near the back fence. One pointing. One digging. Flashlight beams at night. The last photo, Diane Wallace. Clipboard tucked under one arm. A smug smile on her face. Standing on my father's side of the property line. She wasn't just the HOA president. She was a developer now. I remembered the local paper announcing her subdivision project, Wallace Springs. She needed more land. Land she didn't own. The envelope also included a photocopy of the original property deed, one I hadn't seen before. It clearly marked the eastern boundary line and the surveyor's stamp. Dad wasn't paranoid. He was preparing. I stepped outside, holding the letter tight. The sun was sinking behind the sycamore. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower buzzed. Probably from one of Diane's model homes across the bluff. And that's when I noticed the second sign. It wasn't HOA branded. It was a plastic stake, orange flag flapping, stuck halfway into my father's wildflower patch. A survey marker. They'd already started, but they didn't count on me coming back. They thought Jack Winston was gone, and with him the resistance. They thought wrong. Because this land wasn't just acres on paper, it was memory. It was proof. And now, it was mine. It started with movement at the tree line. At first I thought it was a deer. But deer don't wear reflective vests and carry clipboards. Two men and a woman, one with a telescoping rod, another tapping something on a tablet. They weren't on the road. They were on our land, east side, right near where the fence dipped down into the brush. I watched from the porch, coffee in hand, every muscle in my chest tightening. They didn't knock. Didn't even glance toward the house. Just placed a stake, tied a ribbon, marked something on a printout. Surveyors? Contractors? I walked out and called. "Can I help you?" The one with the rod turned like I'd caught him mid-crime. "HOA business," he said quickly. "We're just confirming grade elevations for runoff control. Nothing invasive." I knew what that meant. Legal wallpaper. Make it sound technical enough, and most people back down. But my dad wouldn't have. And neither would I. "Who gave you permission to step onto this land?" I asked. A beat of hesitation. Then the guy smiled, shallow and rehearsed. "It's marked as common access. Just a routine inspection." I didn't say another word. Just pulled out my phone and took a photo. That's when they started packing up. Later that day, I took a drive through the neighborhood. Diane Wallace's face was plastered on a new banner in front of the HOA's office trailer. "Community first, vision always." It made me sick. I stopped by the one person I knew I could trust. Mr. Felix, Dad's neighbor for 20 years. He still kept his mailbox painted like an old train caboose, a detail Diane hated. He poured me sweet tea and shook his head before I even finished telling him what I saw. "They're back at it," he said. "Started coming around right after your dad's first stroke." He told me something smelled off, like they were trying to grab it before he could fight. I blinked. "What do you mean, right after the stroke?" "They held some kind of emergency vote," he said, tapping his temple. "Said the land wasn't being properly maintained, that it was a risk. Passed a rezoning request to classify it as community-managed green space." He leaned in. But Jack was still alive, still had full ownership, and they didn't notify him? Not legally. Just slipped a notice into a public board meeting summary. No one reads. I drove straight back to the shed and opened the envelope again. Tucked behind the deed was a USB stick, labeled Easement Proof, July 18. I plugged it into Dad's old laptop. After some clunky whirring, the file opened. Video, static for the first few seconds. Then clear audio. My father, camera in hand, walking the perimeter of the eastern boundary. East post still intact, wire tag visible. HOA truck parked on Ridgeview Lane. They haven't spoken to me. Just watching. Caught one of them trying to bury a corner stake near the wildflower bed. Got footage, time-stamped. The camera pans to a man kneeling near the property marker. He doesn't notice he's being filmed. I told Diane last week I wasn't selling. And now this. My dad mutters. I know what they're doing. Rezone first. Claim neglect. Then offer a buyout. It's not neglect if you planned it. I paused the video, my heart was hammering. They knew he had health issues. They knew the land still mattered to him. And they waited for the stroke to soften him up. Waited for silence. But he didn't go quietly. He documented everything. I pulled the video files, scanned the timestamps, and checked the metadata. All intact. My dad's last act wasn't to surrender, it was to leave a trail. I printed stills, backed up the footage. And then I called the county clerk's office and requested every public filing the HOA submitted in the last year, including rezoning actions. I wasn't surprised when I saw it. Application 22B, Parcel 12A, Motion to Reclassify, Untamed Public Easement, filed 2 weeks after Dad's stroke. Signed by Diane Wallace. Approved by a vote of 5-0. No mention of landowner consent. No legal notification records. Just a rubber stamp and a few lies buried under technical language. But I had the one thing they didn't expect. Proof. And proof doesn't need a megaphone. It just needs a spark. And I was holding the match. Dad never trusted security systems. He said they made people lazy. If you want to know who's coming for you, he once told me, don't put up a camera in plain sight. Make them think they're alone. I didn't understand it then. Thought it was just another one of his old man sayings. But standing in that shed, eyes stinging from dust and motor oil, I realized he meant every word. Because in the back corner, behind the broken fishing rods and stacked seed bins, I found them 5 little plastic casings, each marked with a strip of orange electrical tape. Birdhouse cams. He'd rigged them years ago, said they were to catch coyotes. Turns out, the real predators walked on 2 feet. I took the SD cards to my laptop. No expectations. Maybe a deer, a nosy raccoon, but the very first file shook that idea loose. Timestamp, March 3rd, 2:11 a.m. Location Eastern Fence Line. The night vision feed flickered to life. Static gray shadows, a narrow band of trees, then movement. A man in a reflective vest steps into frame. Flashlight clipped to his chest. He kneels. Pulls something from a duffel. A rectangular metal object, wrapped in what looks like burlap and duct tape. I leaned closer. He buries it just behind the corner post. Not deep, just enough to cover. He looks around. No hesitation. No pause. Just execution. He doesn't mark it. Doesn't scan it. Just walks off like he dropped off the morning paper. The next file showed another figure. This one a woman, early 40s maybe, in HOA logoed outerwear, placing identical bundles under the tree line near the old irrigation inlet. She was laughing, talking to someone off camera. That's when I stopped breathing. This wasn't surveying. This wasn't landscaping. This was something else. I watched all 5 files. Different nights. Different people. All wearing Pine Grove HOA windbreakers or vests. All placing, not testing. All burying, not repairing. And always on our side of the line. I shut the laptop. This went way beyond property lines. I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Carter Ames, retired sheriff's deputy. Used to hunt elk with Dad every fall. He owed Dad more than a few favors. When I told him I needed his eyes on something sensitive, he didn't ask questions. Just said, "Bring it over." I drove to his cabin, 30 minutes up into the ridgeline. No cell reception. Just the kind of quiet you don't interrupt unless it matters. I set the laptop on his workbench, queued up the footage, and stepped back. He didn't speak for the first 2 videos. Just leaned in, eyes narrowed, jaw tightening. By the 3rd clip, he stood up and exhaled slow. "That's not irrigation work," he said. "What is it?" He didn't answer right away. Just pointed at the man burying the bundle and said, "You see how he turns the device inward? That's a directional trigger posture. Military background would call that a containment angle." "Wait," I said, my mouth going dry. "You think that's sabotage, maybe worse." His voice dropped. "It's not explosive grade, not on its own. But that's not gardening. That's a pressure switch configuration. They're rigging your land." "For what?" "To justify a takeover," he said flatly. "You find one of those in an easement zone, they call it a hazard site. Then they lock it down. Then they clean it up. And next thing you know, it's HOA property under emergency clause annexation." I felt like the shed was spinning. My dad hadn't been paranoid. He'd been hunted. And he left me a trail not just of evidence, but of warning. Carter looked me dead in the eye. "Whatever they planted out there, they weren't planning on you finding it. But now that you have," he glanced at the screen, "you've got 2 options. Quietly escalate it to the right authorities." He paused. "Or you flip the script. And make sure they know they were never alone." I copied the footage onto a drive. And I knew what came next. Because Dad didn't believe in revenge. But he believed in records. And now, so did I. "Without consent," I said. "And based on what I've found, with intent to trigger an emergency reclassification." That got her attention. "Mr. Langston," she said, "you may not know this, but Pine Grove HOA is under secondary review. They applied for a state neighborhood improvement grant 2 years ago, citing erosion risks and undeveloped transition land they marked as public-facing buffer zone. That land was never surveyed properly. If your boundary is inside that footprint, it is. Then they filed fraud." She didn't ask for a copy of the videos right away. She asked for permission. "We'd like to dispatch a verification crew, under the guise of a soil reclamation study. They'll look like state surveyors. They'll be equipped with ground-penetrating radar, legal mapping software, and a telemetry sweeper." And what are they really doing? She didn't miss a beat. Documenting interference. And if they find any active signals, it becomes a criminal matter. That was the shit. I wasn't just defending my father's land anymore. I was watching the line of power move, inch by legal inch, back where it belonged. I gave her consent. She said they'd be on site within 5 days. Quiet, no fanfare, no alerts. Just a state-level development audit filed with the city registrar. Boring to most, terrifying to anyone playing dirty. While they prepped, I did my part. I wrote a letter to Diane Wallace. Respectful. Measured. The kind of correspondence written by someone who knows they're in the right and has the receipts to back it. To the Pine Grove Residential Association Board. This is a formal notice of boundary assertion for parcel 618D previously held by James H. Langston. This parcel remains privately owned, uncontested, and non-transferable by any municipal reclassification due to deed language recorded in 1983 and reaffirmed in. Per legal counsel, I am issuing a cease and desist regarding any physical alteration, surveyor activity, or modification on or adjacent to this property line, effective immediately. All evidence of unauthorized activity has been documented and archived. A formal response is not required, just your silence. Cordially, Matthew R. Langston. I mailed it, certified. Signature required. Then I waited. 3 days later, the surveyors showed up. Khaki pants, bright vests, branded clipboards. One wore mirrored glasses and smiled like a man who already knew where the bones were buried. They didn't ask me questions. They didn't need to. They'd brought their own answers. Diane didn't come out that morning, but her car was parked across the street, idling. I watched her watch them, pacing behind her blinds. Arms crossed, probably counting every stake, every ping, every flagged coordinate. She didn't know who I'd called. But she'd feel it soon enough. Because this wasn't some neighborly complaint. This was state jurisdiction now. And once that seal was broken, even HOA bylaws couldn't stop the flood. Map labeled hazard zones. The sweep started like clockwork. State-licensed soil techs in high-vis jackets, wheeling ground-penetrating radar units over the disputed edge of my father's property. No fanfare. No warning. Just the hum of calibrated sensors, the occasional beep, and the hiss of walkie chatter. At 3:17 p.m., the lead technician paused, checked his screen. Kneeling, he drove a handheld probe into the ground near the northeast fence post. There was a dull metallic click. He froze. Another probe. Another click. 2 here, he muttered. 10 feet down the line, they found a third. And a fourth. All buried 6 to 12 inches deep. All undocumented. All metallic. One of them emitted a low-frequency ping when scanned. Not military grade, but definitely wired. Intentional. Nothing that should ever be in the ground of a residential boundary. I stood a few yards back. Didn't move. Didn't speak. One of the crew looked up at me, nodded once, and pulled out a sealed equipment bag. Chain of custody begins now, he said quietly. These aren't utility markers. The moment they left, the line was flagged off with biodegradable tape, and the site sealed under state recording protocol. It was officially part of an open investigation. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Because retaliation doesn't always wear a badge or carry a shovel. Sometimes it clicks on with a lens. That night, I noticed the red blink. Across the road, mounted on the eve of the HOA community office. A new security camera, tilted directly at my house. By morning, there were 2 more, one on a lamppost, one tucked into the corner of the HOA's decorative pergola, all pointed toward my driveway. A message. A warning. A mistake. See, what Diane didn't know, what none of them knew, was that after Dad's first stroke, I'd quietly upgraded his old hunting cam system. He used to record deer trails. I repurposed it for something else. Motion-synced dash cams. Infrared night vision modules. Encrypted cloud uploads that triggered automatically on motion breach. No wires, no SD cards to steal. Just time-stamped data that lived beyond anyone's reach. And that night, at 2:43 a.m., one of the cameras caught something. Clear, clean, undeniable. A black SUV parked just past the edge of HOA land. A woman, blonde, slim build, slacks and a windbreaker. Face half-lit by moonlight. She walked toward the disputed line, holding 2 things. A steel case and a manila folder tucked under her arm. The dashcam's auto-zoom kicked in. Infrared enhanced. The folder had 2 words printed across the tab in bold black marker. Hazard zones. She knelt. Opened the case. Didn't dig this time, just opened the folder, flipped a few pages, made a note on a laminated aerial photo. And then, just as quickly, she left. But not before turning and looking straight at my house. Straight into the camera. Her face. Diane Wallace. No clipboard, no board vote. Just her. Alone. At the By sunrise, the footage was already backed up 3 ways. 1 copy to an encrypted drive. 1 to private legal archive my dad had pre-registered before his health declined. And 1 sent quietly to Eloise Harker. I didn't confront Diane. Didn't mention the case. Didn't touch the camera. She installed. Because every second she left that lens pointed toward me, she gave me more evidence of harassment, of intent, of obsession. She thought she was watching me. But really, she was being filmed. And the footage was starting to stack like dominoes. Like a slow-burning fuse leading back to everything they'd tried to bury. And soon, it was going to blow. She waved a glossy folder in the air titled Phase 2 Erosion Control System. It's all part of our long-term plan for land preservation, she claimed. There is no danger to any resident. These are preventive measures designed to detect shifting ground. But her spin wasn't sticking. Not this time. Because sitting quietly in the back row, in a crisp dark suit, was someone Diane hadn't noticed yet. Detective Harris, State Bureau of Environmental Offenses. And he wasn't alone. 2 uniformed officers flanked the doors. Silent. Watchful. 1 held a sealed document case. As Diane kept talking, Harris stood. Walked to the front. And without a word, handed her a folded sheet. The room fell dead quiet. She opened it. Read the first line. Her face drained to chalk. Warrant number 453-2. Suspicion of unlicensed hazardous material installation, unauthorized land modification, misrepresentation in public grant application. She started to speak, then stopped. Because behind her the projector flickered on. And there, in 1080p clarity, was herself caught on trail cam footage, kneeling with a steel case and a file marked hazard zones. There was no safety plan. No beautification project. Just a cash grab scheme, wrapped in grant buzzwords, and buried under soil she never had the right to touch. Turns out the landmines weren't explosives. Not technically. They were banned demolition pressure sensors, the kind used to simulate false soil displacement. By burying them and submitting false topography data, the HOA had been fabricating erosion readings to qualify for state redevelopment money. Fraud. Intentional. And recorded. The meeting ended without a vote. The board adjourned in silence. Diane was escorted out. Not in cuffs, but in consequence. The kind that leaves a stain deeper than fingerprints. And across the street? I stood at the fence, coffee in hand, as the beautification crew packed up their gear under state supervision. One of them nodded toward me, smirked. Because while Diane had spent months trying to break ground, I'd planted something stronger. Paperwork. And this time, it exploded exactly the way I planned. But my move isn't over yet. I didn't leak the footage. Not directly. But somehow the video of Diane Wallace, shovel in hand, kneeling over my father's land in the middle of the night, made its way online. No narration, no edits, just raw time-stamped trail cam footage. Find mine, HOA, Karen Landmine Gate. The first headline dropped less than 12 hours later. Explosives planted on private land to skirt development rules. Elderly man's son uncovers cover-up. Channel 8 News, Mid-State Bureau. Then came the cascade. Regional outlets, national feeds. Even a late-night host dubbed it the Pinehurst Plot, where HOA stands for Hell on Asphalt. The media couldn't resist. And who could blame them? A quiet retirement town. A grieving son. An overreaching HOA president caught red-handed with restricted demolition sensors and a hazard zones map. It wasn't just a scandal, it was cinematic. Within 24 hours, 2 HOA board members resigned, pending further clarification of involvement. The neighborhood message boards turned into war zones. Residents who once posted about pet leash lengths and mailbox flags were now sharing legal resources and HOA reform petitions. The best part? I stayed silent. No interviews. No comment. Just enough quiet to let the internet do what it does best: multiply outrage. One commenter wrote, "She literally tried to bomb a property and call it landscaping." Another, "This isn't just corruption. This is HOA domestic terrorism with a floral budget." The footage was mirrored to every major platform. Clips started showing up in TikTok breakdowns, podcast specials, and even an HOA satire subreddit where someone photoshopped Diane's face onto a minefield warning sign that read, "Beware of Karens may detonate under pressure." But this wasn't a joke for me. This was my father's legacy. This was his land desecrated, claimed, and mined by people who thought they were too polished to ever face real consequence. And now? Now they were national villains. Their eco-development grant froze. Their local construction partner pulled out. Their insurance provider initiated an internal review and paused all HOA policy coverage pending liability assessment. And Diane, she tried damage control. A press release from her lawyer described her as a civic-minded organizer caught in an unfortunate miscommunication regarding soil stability tools. But even her own neighborhood wasn't buying it. One homeowner wrote in the comments of a Facebook post, "We just wanted trimmed hedges and quiet streets, not Cold War tech buried next to our bird feeders." The scandal wasn't just exposure. It was unraveling. But I wasn't done yet. Because while they were busy covering their tracks, I was preparing the final blow. Not for views. Not for vengeance. For vindication. And soon, everyone, even the ones still pretending they didn't see it, would have to face the truth. Because in a town that once buried evidence in the soil, the truth had finally sprouted through the concrete. Diane's face drains as the sheriff hand-delivers the notice. Then the permit fraud, the falsified easement vote held while my father was recovering from his stroke. One by one, I laid out the case like evidence at a trial. No yelling, no theatric, just fact after fact after fact, wrapped in footage, documents, and environmental survey data from the undercover team. And then, I reached for the envelope. "My father knew they would come for his land," I said, voice tight. "And he left me this, his final letter, handwritten the week before he passed." I unfolded it slowly. "If they try to claim what isn't theirs, don't fight with fists. Fight with proof. The land remembers. The trees remember. And so do you. Stand where the trees remember you, son, and let truth do the rest." Silence followed. The chair of the commission leaned into his mic. "We've reviewed the documentation. The environmental report confirms hazardous materials. The permitting process shows multiple procedural violations and suspect dates. This board finds sufficient cause to proceed with emergency charter suspension." He looked directly at Diane. Effective immediately, the Pinehurst HOA's authorities revoked pending state-level criminal investigation. Then came the final blow. The side door opened. Sheriff Wendell stepped inside, hat in hand, warrant in the other. He didn't say a word as he walked over to Diane and handed her the folded notice. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared at the document like it might rewrite itself if she looked hard enough. But it wouldn't. Because my father may have died, but his land didn't. And neither did his legacy. But we're still here. And the dirt remembers. There's a stillness now. Not the kind that comes with fear or waiting. The kind that comes after a storm has passed. When the air clears and the earth exhales. Dad's land, our land, looks different these days. And not because we changed it, but because we protected it. The conservation easement was approved 2 weeks after the hearing. State recognized. Federally supported. Parcel 17B is now officially designated as the Jack Riley Memorial Preserve. Untouched, unbuildable, and unbothered. Forever. No future HOA president can so much as repaint a rock here. The survey markers are gone. The signs that once read, "Community Oversight Zone," have been pulled out at the root. And in their place, a new wooden marker now stands at the edge of the boundary line. Hand-carved, sealed in resin, and anchored in stone. Jack's line. Do not cross. It doesn't need any explanation. Around here, everyone knows what it means. The old HOA office sits abandoned. Dust on the window panes. Dead bulbs in the outdoor lamps. Their official website vanished overnight. Redirects to a 404 error now. The banner that used to fly out front, the one Diane called a symbol of community vigilance, was quietly taken down after the criminal charges were filed. Funny thing is, I never even saw it fall. But I saw what came after. Kids run the old trail now. The one that used to wind through the cottonwoods where Dad placed his last trail cam. They laugh, splash in the creek again, build makeshift forts with sticks and rope and imagination. Neighbors come by, some to help, some just to walk. No one asks for anything. They just show up. And the cams? They're still there, still running. Only now they capture smiles. Sunlight, a hawk diving over the ridge. Not sabotage. Not strangers with clipboards and shovels. Just peace. Every week, I walk the tree line Dad used to walk. Boots crunching along the gravel. Hands in my pockets. Sometimes I pause near the third oak from the corner. The one where we found the first buried sensor. Now, there's a bench nearby. I installed it myself. Sanded smooth. Bolted to stone. There's a small inscription beneath the seat. Stand where the trees remember you. His words, my anchor. Sometimes I read them aloud. Sometimes I just sit. And every now and then, I think I can hear his voice. Not in words, but in the rustle of the leaves, the hush of wind between branches. If you've ever seen truth buried under bylaws, or watched power dress up as community pride, you already know how these stories start. But here's where they end, with legacy, law, and quiet resistance that leaves a permanent mark. Keep watching, because this isn't just about one piece of land. It's about how you protect your own.